2020 was said this morning to be the deadliest year in American history due to the COVID attack. I recall when I went back to the community college of Allegheny County that their cult put an image, very telling image of Obama on the escalator, which was difficult to document because the escalator moved. And so the image was always very blurry, and it said, "The joke's on you." Well, this was before the COVID bomb, and of course the joke is supposedly on me and there too, which means that social ostracism for this particular individual is so acute that even when everybody is attacked by his tormentors, the joke is on him. That's very interesting. It comes from a snobby Jewish intellectual circuit, people who went to Harvard and the city of Pittsburgh, who see Christianity as a retelling of the old story of Simplicissimus, the humiliated man who everyone laughed at. So if you humanize the school, you're asking for the return of the object lesson of Simplicissimus. One of the reasons people laugh at me is because they say that I had a behavioral problem, that I was into womanizing. I didn't have a behavioral problem. I was attacked, tortured, and held in bondage as a child. It was the only thing I knew. There are things that I do very well and succinctly. It's the reason I get my name in the press. One of them is write poetry and appeal to people's sensibilities, moral sensibilities about the difference between right and wrong. I wanted to help galvanize interest in protecting women who were from Asia who have had problems in Little Saigon and Chinatown district as a result of human traffickers. The people in charge of those operations weren't interested. They professed that dialectical UW sociology had an inside profile on me as someone who would just embarrass them by exploiting these women. That's not true. Like those women, being held in bondage was the only thing that I knew as a child. It had nothing to do with behavioral problems. The person who was older than me, Donald, who implanted the carrot tape that his swimmer hooker took to Jaime Carbonell for natural language extrusion in the great mock-up, was a person who dominated me by leaving me nowhere else to go because people were beating my brains in and they left me comatose. It was the only thing I knew was to be a 13-year-old child. I used to wonder what it was like not to be inundated with marijuana, what it was like not to be in the custody of a hostage brutal pedophile. But none of this mattered to people like Tricky Rick Santorum when they came swimmering in saying that they were going to man the lifeboats. What lifeboats? You have Robert Fripp. He uses the phrase "in all fairness." That really gets me. What gall. In all fairness, the money made for human trafficking is going to go to the people who assassinated the Kennedys. In all fairness, he says. What a ridiculous person. And you have CMU's name encryption system. Brian Milnes. Carbonell, by the way, was working with Rod, both very intimate and excessive carbon production in terms of name signifiers. Milnes, M. Milnes, it's like millions, and it's M. illness. And he would have millions illness, and he would have this picture of a man sleeping with a newspaper over his face on his door that said neurotransmitters take a holiday, neurotransmitters. And he would say, "I'll file that." He was the only person besides Donald Ostro who had the record The Yard went on forever. And he was a Dungeons and Dragons intimate with Leslie Katz. So these sort of things need to be gone into and studied and understood, who these people were and what this loop is. But one of the things that we see about this is that they masquerade as anti-racism. You have these African nutters who come in, lunatic subdivisions of people like Peter Gabriel and John Hines, who are declared honorary African warriors, I kid you not, by these African subdivisions. And it brings me to the Stranger newspaper and my mother. Mother gives this image of to me in a card, Christmas card of the unicorn in captivity. It was on our wall when I was growing up. She seemed to know that her unicorn son had been taken custody for a great operation of the Union cranks. Who's responsible for the fact that the Union and the Stranger newspaper teamed up to say that a girl who everybody knew I liked King Crimson. Why would they not want to cultivate somebody like me who was a poet? I thought the girl loved me. I didn't know she was a virgin. I didn't even think about it. They said, oh, this proves he was hunting a virgin. Cackle, cackle, cackle. Trump equals Ono. They were both working with Warhol, who was all over me when I was a child through his proxies like a Milda Tuttle. And the Stranger covered for the whole thing. They were the group that made it impossible to investigate the AIDS attack. The joke's on me. Now the COVID bomb. The joke's on me again. Is that what you're saying? The poison in my mouth is the joke is on me, I guess. Well, if you look at the FBI files on Gail Burstyn, you'll see that they have been covering for one of the greatest mass murderers in human history, and they're not even ashamed of it because they're playing this Simplicissimus game. Now, one of her partners, Kirshner, had this game called Cosmic Wimp Out, which had strange rules like 80, 80, 80, people hopping around like a rabbit on a carrot tape, back to Brooklyn, Too Good was one of them. The reason they targeted me was my father was the chair of philosophy of education at the University of Pittsburgh, and this violated what they call the Too Good principle. So what we know is that when it comes to the people who they don't care about talking about someone like me's intimates, but if you say one word about the point is that they're not trying to help. They don't care. They care a lot more about their geopolitical millions illness strategy than they care about solving the tears of a few crying, heartbroken sissies being held in their UW dialectical concentration camp for cereal poisoning and stuff because the joke's on them. I want to say in Pittsburgh there was only one person, Billy Franceschini, who ever expressed any sentiment, any sympathy, any humanity, any brotherly love towards me about the way my sister was being used by that crowd, one after another. None of them ever said a word of apology. None of them made a single motion of compensation. None of them did anything but spit on me. And so you have a situation where BF is very interesting because it's like BF Skinner, right? He's the neuroautomaton who I will do what Simon says. I will be like a Christian. I will be a good person. He was a very nice, lovely person, and they make a mockery of that. It's like their Simplicius mode, because and they have a girl sleeping in a dragon's mouth like Greta and Trump, the big friend, BF. That's the idea. You can't touch him. Kasparowski, who didn't like the way I pronounced his name, he calls, say it again. He walked by a big truck outside George Romero's house with had the keys in the ignition. I said, why don't you want to steal that one, Casper? Because he was going around stealing cars. I tried to get him to stop. I bought him a VW, and all he did was beat my brains in, put a dent in the hood. He was just maniacal human being. We had to move to get away from him. They're saying, oh, he was your friend. Why do you want to steal that one, Casper? Oh, because he's a big motherfucker. This is what Pitt calls the nature of reality. They don't do anything that's more. They do it because it's a big motherfucker.